Number 10, Deadpool? Okay, so not really Deadpool, more like DC's parody version of Marvel's parody character. You know who I'm talking about, it's Red Tool. Red Tool is a mercenary who only fights with power tools, and while he doesn't appear to have regenerative powers, can definitely still take a beating. In fact, he even got beat himself up by Harley Quinn after having his phone number tattooed on her butt and arranging to surprise her for a wedding. People have always thought Harley and Deadpool would make a great match, which is where Red Tool and his sudden romantic inclination come in. Of course, for Harley, it would take more convincing than a surprise wedding. She beat Red Tool to the point that he was knocked unconscious, proving that in DC's opinion, Harley could make quick work of Marvel's Deadpool besides. At least their parody of him. However, Harley did ultimately decide to team up with Red Tool after he came to and they were surrounded by the GCPD. Fortunately, his wedding present to Harley was the perfect ticket out of this predicament. I kind of love Red Tool and Harley Quinn together too. They're pretty cute. Also just like Red Tool in general with his little tool speech bubbles. Number 9, Manos. Manos is the wielder of the Infinity Rings. So yeah, you guessed it. He's a parody of Marvel's Thanos. But just because he's a parody doesn't mean he's not powerful. He still wields those super powerful rings and is super evil, leading to Power Girl to want to take him on when both she and Harley seek him out on their adventure together. While Manos is busy monologuing about just how epically he is going to destroy them both, Harley Quinn manages to steal the rings off his fingers without him noticing, and then accidentally kills him with the rings, to boot. She didn't know they were loaded, you know, so it's not really her fault there. Should this be possible? Probably not. Is it hilarious? You betcha. How did she even steal those rings without him noticing? That's what I want to know. Number 8, Lobo. In Injustice Gods Among Us, Harley Quinn is working some stuff out after Joker is gone and ends up stealing Lobo's flying motorcycle. This ends about as well as you could imagine, with Harley being chased all over by the crazy, overly violent parody of a tough 90s guy. Lobo having the power to regenerate and Harley Quinn being a normal human would mean you'd think that she'd never be able to beat him. But you'd be wrong. Armed with Lex Luthor's super strength and durability pills and her knowledge of psychology, Harley ends up convincing Black Canary and Green Arrow to team up with her and then makes quick work of her pursuer. And then of course, using her psychology, she's like, yeah, this isn't really about me, is it, Lobo? And Lobo's like, it's not, you're right. And before we move on to our next point, just a quick reminder to give this video a thumbs up if you're enjoying it and if you love Harley Quinn as much as I do.
Number 7, Captain America and Sharon Carter. We go back now again to the Civil War comic book event where Captain America was killed by Sharon Carter. Yeah, after Crossbones sniped him, Agent 13, who was also at the time Cap's girlfriend, delivered the final bullet from a much closer point. Well, it turns out it wasn't Sharon who was doing the work, really. I mean, the classic brainwashing made this defeat happen. Dr. Faustus, yeah, this causes a whole chain of events. I mean, for starters, Bucky decides at that point that he should go and try and kill Iron Man, blaming him for the death of Steve Rogers. And then Falcon also goes after his own lead. Now, Tony ended up showing Bucky the letter that Cap wrote about how he should be the next Captain America, and Bucky agrees to take the spot only if he can operate solo. No shield, no nothing, I'm not working for you, I'm not punching in, I'm just doing my thing. And to think that all this came to a climax after Steve's girlfriend, of all people, was the one to deliver the fatal blow, it's just heartbreaking, and it's something that never should have happened. Number 6, Squirrel Girl and Dr. Doom. So Squirrel Girl has beaten some big bads in the Marvel Universe before. She's taken down MODOK, Mandarin, and at one point Thanos. It's becoming a running joke by now, but one defeat that always shocks me is when a bunch of squirrels took down Victor Von Doom. Just a bunch of squirrels. Yeah, it happened back in the 90s in Marvel Superheroes issue 8. So she bumps into Iron Man and then starts to show her like, absolutely, you're absolutely right. The final issue had Peter get the upper hand on Osborn by mind games? Yeah, he explains how Carnage will get all the glory here in this defeat of Spider-Man and not Norman Osborn. I mean, ego is a great place to attack. If it works, it works. So when he becomes Norman Osborn again, the fight is manageable now, and Spider-Man can come out on top. Now, as great as this is, I really don't think it would be this easy to turn the tides. Not after seeing Carnage bombs. Get out of here, no way. Number 4, Batman and the Hulk. Yep, you heard me. So back in the late 70s, Marvel and DC came together for a handful of crossovers. One of these crossovers featured a battle with the Incredible Hulk and Batman. There have been many conversations about who would win in a fight between Iron Man and Batman. If you're a fan of this page, odds are you've had this talk with your friends, because they're both humans who rely on their brains and brawn to get by, kind of even. Personally, I'd pick Batman to win that fight any day. But the Hulk, no chance. Batman vs. the Hulk, issue 27 of DC Comics Special Series. So we have Batman and the Joker trying to control the Green Giant. And when the Hulk gets his hands on Batman, well, that should have been the end for sure. Even Batman said he felt like his spine was going to snap like a pencil. And believe me, if anybody knows what that feels like, it's definitely Batman. So he gets out of his grasp by a nice double ear smack, and then he finishes him off by using some sleeping gas from his belt, followed by a nice flying kick. Now, it's great to see Batman use his skills to take down the Beast. That's what he's good at. Unfortunately, I don't think any fight between them would ever last long enough to give him the chance to do so, especially if he has him in his hands. He would be dead.
Number 3, Wonder Woman. Sometimes you have to defeat the ones you love for their own good and protection. That's what happened in this fight featuring Harley Quinn and Wonder Woman. Well, it was less a fight and more of a rescue slash kidnapped attempt, but still, Harley came out on top here and managed to defeat Wonder Woman. In order, of course, to rescue her. So, it was a nice defeat. Harley Quinn is actually a huge superhero fan herself, if you didn't know, especially of Wonder Woman and of Power Girl. In an attempt to protect Diana from those who were hunting her down, Harley disguised herself as a flower delivery person. And when Diana turned her back to go grab a pen to sign for the flowers, she knocked her out with a gas bomb. So yeah, it wasn't like a crazy epic fight, but still, it's pretty impressive that Harley was able to kind of pull one over on Wonder Woman there. Still beat her, gotta say. Number 2, Death. Not like the character death, but the actual concept itself. In the 2000 Harley Quinn solo series, we see Harley die and go to hell. But you already knew that from my point about Hell's best bounty hunter, Ulysses HIGHWATER. To continue on from that point, Harley doesn't only defeat HIGHWATER in the end by piecing together what he really wants and why and getting it for him, but in doing so, she also manages to escape hell and death itself. You see, Harley wants to help HIGHWATER reconnect with his son as he's hunting down the man who stole him away. His lover, Nathan Drum, his son's lover, not his lover, who he blames for actually corrupting his son. Harley finds out, unsurprisingly, that HIGHWATER's son and Drum are of course not in hell, but somewhere likely much better. The other place perhaps being heaven. She offers HIGHWATER their whereabouts, but makes him promise not to punish either of them for finding love with one another. However, just as HIGHWATER seems to agree and assures Harley that he actually loves his son very much, and so he wouldn't do that anyways, Etrigan shows up and kicks Harley out of hell. You see, she's just too much of a nuisance to remain there. After all, people aren't supposed to find things like love and forgiveness during their stay in hell. So yeah, he rhymes her the heck out of there and then squeezes Loot Harley. He's like, you're too annoying. The Ballad of Harley Quinn. Number 1, the Trinity. Harley Quinn has not only managed to defeat all of those superheroes individually, but even managed to defeat them all together, what we refer to as the DC Holy Trinity of superheroes. In Heroes in Crisis, she manages to make quick work of them, using them against one another. She gets close enough to Diana, hugging her and confessing that she was not the one to blame for the tragedy at Sanctuary, so that she can get her hands on her lasso of truth. Haha. She then uses that to tie up Batman, threatening to break his neck with the lasso while using it to question him. She asks him if he has anything on him that, could be used against Superman. And paranoid old Batman, he definitely does. He has a bit of kryptonite in his belt, he tells her. She takes that and uses it to defeat Superman, taking off and escaping before anyone is able to do anything. Honestly, I'm actually really surprised that Wonder Woman didn't really do more here, because I feel like Diana definitely had the opportunity. But I guess, once you're holding Batman hostage, it's like, not much you can do, because they're like, we don't want Batman to die. So, fair.
Coming in at number 10, we've got Wolverine vs. Wolverine from Marvel's Age of Ultron event. Now, as a mutant that's been cloned once, twice, or even several dozen times, Wolverine is certainly no stranger to having to cross claws with a version of himself. However, the time-traveling shenanigans involved in stopping Ultron's complete takeover of Earth has to be one of the most notable. After making the incredibly difficult decision to travel back in time and kill the creator of Ultron, Hank Pym, Wolverine found out that the new Pymless future he'd created was even worse than the one he'd left, and was immediately attacked by this apocalyptic future's version of Wolverine. Then again, considering the entire reason this version of Earth was now destroyed was partially due to a war with the Skrulls, we can maybe understand why the future Wolverine would be a bit suspicious of any newcomers. At number 9, we have our very first clone of the list with the battle between Thor and his cyborg copy, Ragnarok. During the events of Civil War, the real Thor was presumed dead after saving Asgard from destruction. As a means of reinforcing his side of the conflict, Tony Stark wound up using a strand of Thor's hair to create a half-flesh, half-machine clone of the fallen Avenger. A plan that went horribly off the rails when the cloned Thor, dubbed Ragnarok, killed the superhero Goliath and converted many heroes onto Captain America's side. When the real Thor was eventually resurrected, he wasted little time in completely dominating and destroying his copy, proving once and for all who the true God of Thunder is. Coming in at number 8, we've got another Avenger fighting a less than worthy variant with Captain America vs. HYDRA Cap. After an alternate Steve Rogers that had grown up as a devout follower of HYDRA wound up taking over the entire United States in a particularly controversial Marvel storyline, the world was overjoyed to see the real Steve Rogers return and finally put this imposter in his place. Literally bursting forth out of a shard of the cosmic cube, the true Steve Rogers was able to fight back against this twisted version of everything he stood for and eventually break his armor down with a little help from the worthiness deciding Mjolnir.
Number 7, Deathstroke. Of course, this one, like Lobo, was a bit of a team effort. In fact, even more of a team effort than Lobo's defeat, if I'm being honest. But still, Harley fought alongside the rest of the Suicide Squad to take down Deathstroke. And it worked, so I'm counting it. They ultimately were successful, and Harley did help. So yeah. Deathstroke actually was also working with the squad but ended up betraying them. Together with Black Manta and a final shot from Deadshot, Harley took down Slade Wilson, which even with help is still pretty impressive considering how usually unstoppable and undefeatable Deathstroke is considered to be. Yeah, I feel like even if you get help in defeating Deathstroke, you're still doing pretty good. If you can do it. I couldn't do it with help. I don't know, maybe unless like Superman was helping me? Number 6, Ulysses HIGHWATER. Ulysses was Hell's very own bounty hunter who pursued Harley after she managed to break out of her own personal circle of torment in the steamy underworld. I don't know why I called it a steamy underworld, because it's hell and it's not nice. I feel like steamy makes it sound a lot nicer than it actually is. She was back with her crew, the Quintets, and while Ulysses was a powerful demon who wielded guns and magic smoke and magic bullets, Harley found a way to outsmart him. I just love that this is more often than not Harley's tactic. In a typical psychologist play, she simply found a bounty that HIGHWATER craved more and used it to manipulate him. He caught her, but she found a way to manipulate her tormentor, Petite, and then get back to Ulysses to offer him the bounty of his dreams so that she might escape his ire. Pretty brilliant, really. It didn't end up working out for HIGHWATER, but in the end, it definitely worked out for Quinn. Number 5, Batman. At least this one feels like a sort of fair fight because both Batman and Harley Quinn are humans without any superpowers. But when it comes to skill sets and resources, Batman is definitely working with a lot more than Harley Quinn is. Still, somehow, there have been multiple occasions where Harley has bested Batman in both the animated universe and even in the comics, and much to the chagrin usually of the Joker, proving that while Joker may have been around for longer, Harley might somehow be an even greater criminal genius in some weird twist of fate. Of course, Batman also might try to convince you that he's only lost any fight to Harley because he wanted to, and that it was all part of his master plan. But then, what else is new? Isn't that usually Batman's go-to excuse in the face of defeat? I don't know how many comics I've read where Batman's like, oh, I meant to lose. It's all part of my master plan. Okay, Bruce. Of course, if you still feel like this is too, racy or is too dangerous, let us know and we can always try to do something different. Number 4, Adolf. I mean, this one is just super surprising because Harley would need a time machine or something to even get back in time to the leader of the German forces during World War II, yeah? Or you might just need Superman's balls. No, not those balls. These balls! Harley managed to swipe these Kryptonian power orbs while she was in Superman's Fortress of Solitude. The green ones allow you to time travel, which sends Harley back in time to, well, an alternate timeline that basically looks a lot like DC's Bombshells, in this case. In fact, it pretty much is DC's Bombshells. Harley goes back there and surprisingly not only runs into and defeats Adolf, but manages to defeat a bunch of armed soldiers besides. It's all pretty impressive, actually. She also gets to kiss herself. Her bombshell self. Her bombshell self is gross.
At number 3, we've got the original Clone Saga, the story of Peter Parker versus Ben Reilly. For years, the biggest question in all of Spidey comics was, who is the real Peter Parker? The hero we've been following for years, or this new character originally introduced as Ben Reilly? Also going under the name of the Scarlet Spider, these two characters would go back and forth from friends to enemies and everything in between, with Ben even taking the main Spider-Man label for a while as they struggled with questions of identity and who was behind their complicated lives. That's some clone drama at its very finest. Coming in at number 2, we have Mr. Fantastic versus the Maker. Now, most fights on this list have been between two variants of a character that have only briefly encountered one another, or eventually were able to reconcile their differences. But in the case of the Maker, this is a version of Reed Richards that is just as smart and cunning as his regular heroic self, but using that intellect for his own twisted goals again and again. Not only are these two versions of Reed Richards directly opposed to one another, but their greatest battles have involved the fate of each of their respective universes, with the Maker still dead set on finding a way to restore the Ultimate Universe to its former glory. And finally, at number 1, we have Deadpool versus Evil Deadpool, a matchup that definitely has the weirdest origin story compared to anyone else on this list. Following an encounter with a love-struck stalker superfan, Deadpool searches her house to discover that she's actually been collecting discarded body parts that he'd lost over the years in her freezer. Weirded out by this turn of events, Deadpool dumps all of the parts into a dumpster, not realizing once they thaw that all of the body parts will Frankenstein together because of his healing factor, forming a new, even more hideous Evil Deadpool. With this Deadpool wanting to accomplish evil feats that even the real Deadpool wouldn't consider, it's not long before the two super violent copies are battling it out.
Kicking off the list at number 10, Spider-Man, Jester, and Jack-O-Lantern. The MCU's Captain America's Civil War is much more tame than the comic book. I mean, for starters, in the comic, Peter sides with Tony until he realizes that Tony is spying on him, so he switches over to Cap's side. That didn't happen in the movie at all. So in the comic, this causes Stark to send out Jester and Jack-O-Lantern to go and fight Spider-Man. So Peter ended up getting his butt kicked to these guys, and it's all thanks to Stark. There's no chance also that Peter should have lost to them. I mean, imagine if he didn't lose, the entire story would be so different. At first, the two thought taking orders from S.H.I.E.L.D. was a bum deal, as they put it, a bum deal. That is until they got the orders to fight Spider-Man, which they made very clear that they enjoyed doing. And before we continue on with this list, if you guys could go ahead and give us a thumbs up on this video, it helps the channel out a lot. We really appreciate it. You guys are the best. Thank you so much. Now back to our list. Number 9, Batman vs. Guy Gardner. Okay, this one comes from Justice League issue 5, and it's commonly known as the punch. We have a punch and we have a slap. Now it's time to talk about the punch. So in this comic, Batman comes to take over the Justice League International, and Guy Gardner doesn't share the same enthusiasm as the rest of the team. So for more than one issue, he makes it very clear that he doesn't like this new leader. He's not a fan of the Bats. So naturally, a large conflict was growing, although Batman was clearly the better fit for the role. So he challenged Batman to a fight without the use of his power ring. Big mistake. And then Batman proceeded to knock him out with one punch. One punch, one punch. Yes, here we go. Blue Beetle even got pumped about it and started yelling, one punch, one punch. Hence why it's a big thing now. This is an amazing moment, and an even greater lesson rather, but a Green Lantern getting knocked out by a human punch should never happen, ever. Never. Don't start fights you can't win without the ring that makes you a superhero, or else you're just a guy in a suit. Pun intended. Number 8, Bruiser vs. Wolverine. Runaway.
Gotta go with the classic storyline of Hulk versus the Maestro. Bruce Banner often has to face off against different mental versions of the Hulk inside his head, but this alternate version of himself from a post-apocalyptic future is the real deal. Naming himself Maestro after conquering what remains of America following a nuclear winter, this version of the Hulk has become far stronger than the Hulk's usual starting strength, with years of sucking up deadly radiation only improving his ferocity and power. When the real Hulk encountered this warlord version of himself, the only way he was able to finally come out on top was by literally warping the Maestro back in time to be killed by the same gamma bomb that created the Hulk back in the 60s. I'd say that's a little bit of overkill though. Coming in at number 6, we have the Battle of the Batmen with Tim Drake versus Jason Todd. Now, the many Robins of the DC universe are no strangers to occasionally squabbling amongst themselves, but when both Tim Drake and Jason Todd are dressed as Batman and beating the hell out of each other in the middle of the Batcave, well, that's just dramatic enough to earn a spot on this list. During a period of time in which Bruce Wayne is believed to have been killed by Darkseid, Jason Todd had taken over the cowl and cape and become a much deadlier Dark Knight. Not wanting Bruce's no-killing rule to be abandoned, the Bat family tried many ways to get Jason to stand down, before finally culminating in a Batman vs. Batman battle that shook the Bat family to its core. At number 5, we've got Miles Morales versus Miles Morales versus Miles Morales versus Miles Morales? That's right, it's a 4-way battle this time, as just like the original Spider-Man, Miles Morales wound up getting his own clone saga. When a villain known as the Assessor experimented on Miles' spider-modified DNA, he was able to create 3 rapidly aging clones, each with their own quirks and variations on Miles' base powers. Going by the names of Shift, Salim, and Mindspinner, these 3 clones weren't inherently evil, but were dead set on finding a cure to their rapid clone degeneration, a miscommunication that wound up bringing them into conflict with the real Miles Morales. Coming in at number 4, we have Superman versus his 6-dimensional future self, which just might be the most comic book thing I have ever said out loud. When the entire DC multiverse was at stake due to Lex Luthor and his followers attempting to break the Source Wall and free the Dark Goddess Perpetua, Superman and the Justice League were forced to open a doorway to the mythical 6th dimension, where only the creators of the multiverse could usually exist. After passing through the doorway, Superman seemed to return as an older, wiser, and more enlightened version of himself, a hypothetical perfect Superman. However, this all turned out to be a ruse by Perpetua's son, the World Forger, leading to the real Superman and his futuristic doppelganger to battle it out at the very edge of the universe. Man, what a bummer that this guy's awesome beard turned out to not be real after all.
Number 3, Iron Man and Magneto. Now when I say that, your first thought probably is, well of course Magneto would win a fight fighting a guy in a metal suit, but this wasn't the case during an X-Men vs Avengers storyline. If you think this is a no contest, you've never met Tony Stark. So Stark gets buried by Magneto under 200 tons of rubble, because even though Tony's suit at this point was made of carbon nanotubes, the island that he was fighting on was made of metal. So step 2 was for Tony to release a swarm of high-tech magnets to try and throw him off his game a little bit. This of course didn't work. You're giving magnets to Magneto, you know? So Magneto tried reaching out to the cosmos to channel power from other. If he didn't make the mistake of eating him, he probably could have done it. Or the Hulk should have healed after the whole Wolverine C-section thing, so the fight should have maybe continued. I mean, for the story to end this way, it was a little disappointing.